Begin log. It began as a mistranslation, or so the humans had thought. In the early years following establishment of communication between our species, one area quickly noticed and fixated on by the human historians was how complete and accurate our own historical records were, despite having comparable lifespans and quality of recording tools and methods during the development of our own civilization. The word that was mentioned again and again was witnessed, with an improbable number of accounts written from a first-hand perspective, rather than retrospectively. Understandably, it was chalked up to a lexicographical oddity, a misunderstanding of perspectives, or similar error in our communication. It was no error, and so the humans first learned of the Lodestar Initiative. Nearly a century before, our top minds had developed a method of rendering a participant out of phase with our material universe, rendering them imperceptible and intangible. Simultaneously, our astronomers had finished research on a nearby black hole, and a unity was discovered among the two projects. After some trial and error, a craft and a volunteer were sent to the black hole, protected from the ravages of its presence thanks to their phasing, but allowing it to pull and propel them. The speed was sufficient to slingshot them through time rather than just mere space, and into a lazy orbit around our planet some hundreds of years previously. It was through these unseen visitors that we had mapped out our history, recorded it in excruciating detail, discovered hidden intricacies that had been lost to time and the decay of records. It was during this first presentation that one of the initial human researchers, Dr. Isaac Schultz, asked about dephasing while planetside, and seemed surprised to learn that we had indeed experimented with that as well. However, we had found it to be dangerous in the extreme, with a quintet of phase scribes lost before we had a better idea of what we were dealing with. No matter how small the thing, experiments found a manifestation and modification could not pass unnoticed, with every change causing ripples to subsequent time. A gemflower plucked from a remote meadow, a single entry changed in a remote and disused scrollhouse record, a pinch of sand moved from one crimson beach to another. In these, the development of future centuries or millennia was changed enough that our physicists estimated that it resulted in a timeline splitting, and the subsequent loss of the individual making the change. Something as seemingly minor as providing a scrap of food to the hungry could ripple into unknown temporal turbulences. It was up to philosophers to argue over if those unfortunate meddlers were destroyed outright by paradox, or if they had diverged enough from our timeline that the future they returned to would not be their own, but regardless, they were lost forever. So we were surprised that, in the wake of these dire warnings, Dr. Schultz immediately volunteered to help humans participate in the Lodestar Initiative. Thanks to the diligent work of him and hundreds of others, the delicate calculations and fluctuations to adjust to human physiology and a target of Earth instead of our own home planet were overcome in just under a decade. 8 years to the day after volunteering, Dr. Schultz stepped aboard his craft, took off towards the month-long trip to the black hole, and never returned. Months became years, but he was gone. However, in the wake of the Doctor's disappearance, we were again surprised by a steady influx of human volunteers to continue in his footsteps and help continue the human participation in the initiative. Despite this optimism, we were met with a shocking failure as the second wave began making their voyages. No humans ever came back. At first we assumed technological failure, and despite our hesitations, the renewed response from the humans we were working with was to continue sending out ships, as the wave of volunteers increased by leaps and bounds. After thorough examination failed to turn up any physical problems, we consulted with a cadre of our psychologists that had begun to study humans, to better understand this new species. It was there that we thought we had the breakthrough. The humans were not intentionally abandoning the project. We had screening tests in place to ensure commitment to the project and its aims. However, when we sent them back to observe pivotal events, such as the beginnings of wars or the deaths of influential leaders, the psychologists warned that the temptation to interfere was too great. So parameters were changed, scopes realigned, missions redirected to remote locations absent of major historical events that might sway our mind to action. The next wave of volunteers was sent out. No humans ever came back. This time we consulted with human psychologists and learned that our efforts were likely futile. It was a quirk of human nature that was preventing their return. You see, humans cannot stand idly by while others are in pain, in danger, in despair. Humans provide aid by reflex, unlike our kind, and will often seek out a wrong to correct, even if it puts them in peril. To ask a human to stay their hand from compassion is like asking them to cease breathing. Perhaps the voluntary explorer acted to prevent a genocide, stop a war, avert a famine. Or perhaps they provided a warm meal for a night, showed love to an unloved child, saved an unlucky passerby from a premature end. They could not have had the knowledge that the person they were helping would live to do anything of historical note, that the selfless acts they were performing would ever have an impact on history. And yet through their absence we feel the everlasting consequence of their small kindness. We can never know with any certainty what changes have been made, or how many multiverses have been splintered off by this altruism. It seems that no matter where, no matter when, humans will ensure that others have a future, even if it means they sacrifice their own. As I see the faces of each new human volunteer, warn them of the consequences of any intervention, I would like the record to show that two things are assured. Humans never come back, and I have never once seen them regret it. End log.